Mental health, like physical health, is something we all have. When we talk about mental health, it's usually about depression, anxiety, and thoughts of suicide. But what's not said is that it affects us all. Think of our mind like a bottle of soda. Life shakes us up. And inside, the pressure builds. That pressure is looking for somewhere to go. And if we don't release it, it grows. It grows to the point where we can't enjoy the things we used to, we can't leave the house, or even get out of bed. We have to find moments to open up and release it. It can be as small as sitting still and taking a deep breath. When we talk to each other about what's bothering us, the cap comes off and pressure releases. Forget the stigma, all of us need to talk about our mental health. Start the conversation with hope for the day. We are in this together.
All right. So that is Hope for the Day's Shake the Conversation video, which you can find on our YouTube channel. If you're watching this live stream on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. And today's conversation is titled Welcome to Mental Health Month. We're really just introducing Mental Health Month because May, for those who don't know, is generally treated as National Mental Health Month or Mental Health Awareness Month in the States. And we found that it's also, the attitude is shared internationally as well. We obviously understand there's all sorts of, official days for this, that, or the other, but typically speaking, we've always, at Hope for the Day, honored May as Mental Health Month. And we're so psyched because this month has been really special for us. We've got a lot of great news that we're going to be covering in this episode and a lot of great guests on. But before we get started, just when we talk about Mental Health Awareness Month, we as an organization have always wanted to normalize the conversation and talk about mental health, not just during the special awareness months or a special day, but we wanted to focus on this conversation. So in order to break stigmas and sort of dispel the silence around it, make this something that we're talking about every single week, every single day. But it's important to also think about when we talk about Mental Health Month or these special months, maybe we can use these times to highlight some facts, stats, statistics like that. And when we talk about mental health in America, we know that according to research from our friends at NAMI and the CDC, there's a lot of different sort of stats around how many people are impacted, but I pulled some numbers just on sort of the state of mental health in America in terms of resources that are available. And a really interesting fact that's always jumped out to me is that if you think of the whole continental United States and places like Hawaii, across all 50 states, only 60% of American counties have access to practicing physicians, practicing psychiatric physicians, people qualified as mental health support, which is a little different than if somebody's like a social worker or counselor. But only 60% of all American counties have access, some level of access to practicing clinicians. And accessibility is such a gigantic part of the overall mental health challenge. When we talk about proactive suicide prevention, if we're trying to generate conversations and early intervention, getting people to reach out for support before they reach a stage of crisis or before conditions are left unaddressed or undertreated, that could exacerbate the crisis. An essential part of that is obviously has to be services and resources, not just the hospitals, which is very much serviceable for the crisis stage, but if we want people to start conversations that might ultimately require getting healing and treatment and management tools, that's clinicians, that's mental health providers at that level. And to think that there are people who, when they look for resources and services, even if they have built up the strength and the courage to start the conversation for themselves, when they look out into their community, they don't find anything accessible. And that's one of the important pieces of this conversation that we want to make sure is in focus, is that accessibility isn't just somebody being willing to want to go and get treatment, but it's also making sure that there are resources around. And one of the ways we change that is by changing community policies, meaning if we as individuals and as community members begin to embrace the importance of mental health and begin to embrace the understanding of we can be talking about this and we should be treating this just like our physical health, that means that we can change how we prioritize mental health at an institutional level. That we expect there should be hospitals and primary care physicians, and we want things like vaccines and treatment for people's physical maladies, the visible physical maladies. The same level of prioritization needs to be grown for mental health challenges, and it's not there yet, but we change that by educating people, by breaking the silence, by continuing to do the type of work that Hope for the Day and a lot of other great organizations do in their own sort of facets. So, today's our introduction to Mental Health Month, and we actually were going to be planning this episode building around one of Hope for the Day's key tools for programming and outreach, for breaking the silence, for starting conversations about how we address our soda bottles. And that was Hope for the Day's Sip of Hope Coffee Bar, which is located in the Logan Square neighborhood of Chicago, Illinois. And due to the realities around the pandemic, we, like all sorts of small businesses and large businesses around the world, had to make certain decisions, hard decisions. We had to shut down the shop, the coffee bar, which had been opened on May 1st, 2018. And we were lining up, in January of 2020, we were, getting really excited to celebrate our 2-year anniversary and really hyped up for celebrating the way this has become such a monumental piece of Hope for the Day's programming, not just for the Chicagoland area, but Sip of Hope as an entity has been a beacon of inspiration for people in Chicago, in Illinois, in America, and across the planet. And I don't mean that like over dramatically. That's not just from Yelp reviews or people firing off emails to us. We've literally had people walk in to the store who said, I made travel arrangements and coordinated visiting Chicago around making sure I got to step foot in Sip of Hope. And another way for people who've never even been to America that Sip of Hope served as an inspiration point is that if we can build a space that is centered on normalizing these conversations and raising the visibility of resources and information and being this sort of beacon spot in a community, then that means we can do it in our own spaces too. And so Sip of Hope is very much a versatile thing that is more than its brick and mortar, but the brick and mortar is super critical. And when we shut down, like a lot of other organizations and companies, Sip of Hope is a business, right? And we made what were hard decisions, but easy ones. We decided to take reserves and financial support and make sure that the staff had been taken care of and that we had paid the bills for Chicago vendors instead of trying to skate out on that, because our vendors who support and supply Sip of Hope are also, almost 90% of them are small local area businesses. So it was just the ethical and right thing to do. But we found ourselves coming into the spring that there were shortages, just like a lot of other businesses are looking at. And we did our due diligence and applied to all sorts of different sorts of grants and the federal things that are available and municipal and state level things. And we weren't getting results. So we decided we were going to take the chance and run a GoFundMe to exclusively fund the capital support for Hope for the Day, its operating ability. And we had set a very, 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 very sort of bold goal, trying to raise $60,000 for the span of May 1st through the end of the month, because we needed to sort of have concrete decisions by basically June 1st, because our board wanted to make sure that we were able to have Sip of Hope running effectively and autonomously without it being necessarily a financial impact to Hope for the Day's ability to run and provide its education programs, because Hope for the Day is the parent company of Sip of Hope. Well, all that said, we launched our GoFundMe about 2 days before May 1st, just as a lead-in. It was called Operation Save Sip of Hope. And Hell's Bells, folks, on just yesterday, we hit our goal plus $303. And we, on behalf of Hope for the Day, cannot thank you enough for the dramatic and aggressive response from the community of both, just as I had said before, both the local Chicagoland community, all the people who've come into the store, either as ongoing, consistent, regular customers, or people who saw it as a bit of a pilgrimage that they would come from a couple miles, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 100 plus miles out, and they've only maybe visited once once each year or once every 6 months. And then support from all over the country and beyond the United States. We had more than 500 plus individual donors. We had 300 individual donors just in the first 48 hours, which if you study like crowdfunding, metrics, it's just absurd. And, looking at our final count here, 821 individual donors. I hope, and this looks like this is where our homie Mike is giving us the real-time screen share. And there were major contributors and there's $5 contributors. And as far as we're concerned, each and every single person who stepped up to the plate is a critical contributor. And we're just blown away. And we know, and every penny that's raised after this target goal goes to further strengthen and shore up and support for the long term, because we know we're in uncertain times, and we know that hitting our goal, we made sure to find the responsible number to operate and be able to honor all of our financial obligations as we operate. But I think it's something that if you're listening right now or in days future past, you should all give yourselves a huge, huge round of applause. I'd like to sort of just extend a thank you out to our amazing team at Hope for the Day for sort of getting this organized and prepared, and all the graphics and the logistics and the copy, and getting everything ready to rock and roll in a timely manner. And with that said, it was perfect because we were going to use this time to sort of talk about Save Sip of Hope and the ins and outs. And now we're kind of, maybe this is a little bit of a victory lap, but we had a guest who was going to come on who was an absolute pillar of the Sip of Hope operations, because just to remind everyone, Hope for the Day owns Sip of Hope. Sip of Hope is a social enterprise that is operated underneath Hope for the Day, but it's its own autonomous LLC with its own management and staff of people who've got to be there, and they're the front point, day to day. So while Hope for the Day is out doing its education and hands-on work in schools and businesses and places and community spaces, every single day that Sip of Hope was open, there was a deeply committed and passionate staff who were having the conversations and providing top-level service, delivering the delicious dark matter coffee and all that good stuff. And, they're as much a part of the Hope for the Day family as anyone who you may not see as visible because they're in the office space. But we had one of those frontline homies, Michelle, who we wanted to come on, and we just sort of talked. We were going to be talking about this, but we're going to still talk about Sip of Hope for a little bit right now. So let's make sure she's going to introduce herself formally, but let's make sure she can be heard and seen. Michelle.
Hello.
Hey, Michelle, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great, Carl. It's good to see you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and please introduce yourself formally to our listeners and watchers.
Yeah, hello, internet and audio world. My name is Michelle, and like Carl said, I have worked at Sip of Hope for the last 2 years since we've opened the shop. And I don't just feel like a barista. I feel like a person that's part of a community. And so that's what I work at Sip of Hope. And I've also finally completed my master's degree in social work. So I'm going towards my clinical social work license. And yeah, it's just the two worlds of mine coming together. Coffee, working in coffee for a long time, and mental health. And it all came together, and it's Sip of Hope, and it's the best place in the whole world.
I don't know if we have our soundboard up, but we should celebrate, your academic success.
Oh, I'll get it.
That's Mike Vinopal, our education lead and support on Conversations Cafe, if you're hearing that. But yeah, no, we should definitely celebrate your academic achievements, because good news, I think especially in this time and place, good news wherever we can pick it up and get it is great. And obviously it's also a reflection of your dedication and your hard work. And it's also, I think, it's relevant for the fact that here, we've never thought of like anyone who's behind the bar at Sip of Hope as just a barista or just a staff member, because it's a coffee shop and it has to be a business. But when we say that it's more than that in a lot of ways, we don't want to diminish anyone who has made the effort to be of service through coffee anywhere else on the planet. But from your experience, what has been unique? Because how much experience have you had in the coffee serving world, prior to Sip opening?
Yeah, gosh, over 10 years now. Yeah, but a little over 10, a little more than over 10 years. But yeah, it's, every place is different, and there's amazing coffee shops out there, and everyone is always kind and welcoming and, wanting to talk about coffee most places that you go to. But Sip of Hope is definitely different because our focus and intention of being there is to break the silence and to destigmatize mental health and talk about suicide and talk about prevention, and really just be a pillar of like community support, but also like throw down on a mean latte, So like, but yeah, I it's different. I mean, we're all trained in mental health first aid, and we're all brushing up on that as much as we can throughout the years. And it's just different, there's a lot of people that come in, like you were saying, people come in and say, hey, I'm here from like Arizona, or hey, I'm here from, gosh, I don't think I've personally met anyone that has come in from other countries, but I know that it's happened. So when that happens, it's just mind blowing. Like, I don't think we realize sometimes how much of an impact the shop is having on people's lives. But with everyone's donations from the from the campaign, has been really amazing for us all to see that, because it does kind of show how much it's needed. So.
That's really important, that you bring that up too, from your past background before you ever stepped into Sip of Hope. Why we even opened up the shop, why we went in that direction, was there was a few different things that play there. Home for the Day in its earliest years has been able to grow through partnerships with individuals who very much believe that their work is connected within the communities they're a part of, that they're not just trying to grab dollars and and forget about the customers beyond that. And Dark Matter Coffee was really an OG for us, in that they were an interaction in which we could help support and bring education into their team, their staff. But they also wanted to bring that message to the storefront side, to let anyone who walked into the Dark Matter experience know about mental health, and it's okay not to be okay. And from that, it sort of really highlighted the fact that we are having conversations around coffee. The coffee house throughout human history has been a place of connection. It's been a place of radicalism. It's been a place of a lot of things. And so when Johnny, led the charge on pushing this through, coffee as the connection point made a lot of organic sense. And this might have at one time been, this would be a drop-in center that serves coffee. But we found that there's actually something that much more critical about this being open to the public and being a place that, you come in and the conversation might be right there in your face. You know, it's in the art, it's in the resources that aren't hidden away in the back, but right when you walk in. But you may not want to have that conversation those first couple of times. Maybe it's just smiling and meeting a staff that is warm and inviting and is prepared to have that, but you don't have to come in and pour out your soul every time. You know, and we've seen people come in and their very first visit in, they've sort of like, you know, like sort of have like a really deep emotional impact, you know, can bring tears to the eyes, right? Mm-hmm. But for other people, they're gonna come in a few times, grab the cup and go, and the fact that they just take the cup, and maybe they get a free wristband because we have these different resources that are available, and they take that out of the store with them, and that's where the conversation is going to happen, is with their friends and with their peer groups at home or whatever that space is. And I was wondering, you know, long before Sip of Hope existed, there were probably people having like heavy conversations with anyone they could get connected to, and the barista, the bartender, the server, those are all people who can end up being that place. But for you, is there any sort of, you know, even if you've got to sort of to make sure not to disclose individuals' details or whatever, but, you know, are there any conversations that really stick out to you or stayed with you?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, you know, people in the service industry, whether they want to hear it or not, are going to get stories, right? Like we're going to, you know, hairdressers, you know, food service industry people, like anyone that you kind of go to for service, you start to like open up to them. And there's been some instances at SIP where, like you said, you know, sometimes some people will come in and, you know, at first, like I might not remember them the second time they come in because it was a really fast interaction. You know, maybe had my brain somewhere else, maybe they had their brain somewhere else, but after a couple of times you start recognizing like, hey, that person's been here a few times and they're starting to get more comfortable and they're starting to come closer. And you know, we're all really funny, weird people that work at SIP, so like our conversations can be kind of weird sometimes, and people will like join in, and that's what's been amazing. And I think that outside of SIP, prior to being open, I was actually working for Starbucks, and that's where Brian and I met. Brian's the manager at Sip of Hope, BK, and he, so we met there and we worked across the street from a single room occupancy hotel in the Uptown neighborhood, which unfortunately most single occupancy hotels have shuttered their doors and turned into bougie studio apartments. But in that space at that Starbucks, I've made so many connections with people that were living in the hotel across the street, and people with mental health disabilities, people with substance use disorder, co-occurring things. A lot of weird stuff happened there that we were worried for them, but you know, we also didn't know how to get them the support that they needed at that time. And there were definitely some characters that would come in, and you know, I would do my best to just, you know, treat them like everyone else. And you know, just because they're having a rough day, or you know, maybe they're coming down off of being high and they're having a hard time, like they're people. Everyone's a person no matter what. So I mean, I think that was like one of the first times that I had really started talking about mental health and like experiencing some mental health and like substance use, like the world of that in a coffee shop setting. So I think it was pretty interesting, and it's definitely gotten me to where I am today, like having that job in that place.
Thank you for sharing that, because that was a big part of crafting the vision at Sip of Hope, was that free and clear, if you are out in the community on the front side, especially in an urban space and really anywhere, people who are looking for connection or might need that connection and maybe are shuttered out or boxed out or sort of excluded from other places, things like a coffee shop become an anchor spot, a beacon, one of the few places where they feel they can interact and associate theoretically without being, abused or harangued. And we wanted to make sure that, this was not a place where we could just we wanted to be sensitive to the reality that you don't necessarily know what someone's bringing in when they walk through that door. And that might be true in any sort of public service place, but the fact is gosh, trying to hopefully today's, entire psychology around or strategy around proactive prevention is about respecting the dignity of the individual. And folks who are coming in who maybe be living with undertreated and untreated mental illness doesn't mean that they're inherently a threat to society or anything like that. And in other places, the response might be to get them out or move them away. And why we really put a big sort of focus on making sure our staff was having heightened levels of education was because, we weren't trying to train you all to become bouncers or have to go hands-on with people. That's not, fair. But instead to make sure that you're at the heightened level of mindfulness and sensitivity, even if you're empathetic people, the whole logic around meeting people where they are and not where they expect them to be. That's a conversation that is easier said than can be done. And that's actually was one of the challenges in opening up SIP. And I feel like one of the best successes we've had is that we've really been able to engage people as they are. And this isn't a place where like you have to be bubbly and cheery and happy-go-lucky, even though we're an affirmative mental health space. When you walk in, that does not mean you have to be rosy sunshine when you go to the counter, because that can be alienating. Some people, for any number of reasons, come in and they just want to, let me get my drink and go, I gotta go. And you don't have to be like, hi, great to see you. Da, da, da.
Yeah.
And we wanted to make sure our staff are comfortable being on the other side of it too, that you're not, it's not like office space where like you have to be at the front counter, and because we're affirmative on mental health, that you have to be game facing like, hi, I'm Michelle. Isn't it great to be here today?
I mean, my personality is kind of like that all the time, but like there's definitely moments where I have said to customers, like, I'm not okay today. Like today sucks and my head hurts, or I'm tired. I'm thinking about this paper that I've got to write. Like, but even I think me sharing that with them shows them that like it is a safe space to really talk about whatever you want. And it helps them kind of see, we're real people, you're real people. Like, it's like a no BS zone, I guess you would say. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's a zone that like, it doesn't matter what you put on paper. The fact is that the community and the environment that has been so engaging and so powerful for people to directly embrace being in there, and even by virtue of seeing it through video or reading effectively the testimonial that is a Yelp or a Facebook comment or an Instagram comment or any positive comment. All of that it doesn't matter what we put down on paper, right? All of that is because of individuals like you and individuals like BK and the simply incredible staff that is with us, the people who have made a commitment to join and be a part of the staff whose experiences have taken them on to other endeavors. I think it's really critical that people put a face and names to the faces of the people who make Sip of Hope on a day-to-day experience the magical place that it is. And I'm gonna, from a citation standpoint, I want to hijack this quote I heard about a sleepaway summer camp I used to work at, which was effectively that place. It wasn't just a place; it was a feeling. And so this is not an original thing I'm saying, but like when I think of Sip of Hope, it is a place, but it's also this feeling that you carry with you. And it's because of people like you, Michelle, and the SIP team, past and present, who have really made this, really is a no BS magical place that feels as much like a home as a feeling of inspiration, of shelter, of safety, of compassion. So I think it's important for our listeners and watchers right now and in future days to really appreciate the level of commitment it takes to provide that kind of service to a community. And Michelle Piraino is one of those stellar, phenomenal human beings. I think we had a little soundbite that was also in honor of the graduation thing. I don't know where we got that. I don't know if we got it on there.
Oh my God!
So, yeah. So,
Thank you.
so we're happy to do it. Oh man, I'm so glad. I'm so glad we.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
So
I just wanted to say one more thing. Like, if you're watching that are not able to come to Sip of Hope, like, you know, this is a community and you can build your own community wherever you are. It takes some time, it takes some effort, but it really just takes passion and love for your fellow people. And if you don't have a Sip of Hope in your neighborhood, that's okay. You can talk to your friends and neighbors and build something that can have the same feeling. That's awesome.
Right. That's perfect. And if you want to support Sip of Hope, even though we hit our goal, we're going to keep the fundraiser running through the end of May, because every dollar continues to build up a further reserve for us to operate securely and make sure we've honored our obligations to payroll and overhead to our vendors. So one way to support Hope for the Day's Sip of Hope coffee bar is go to savesip.org. The link and information will be in the chat thread also. But you can make a direct donation to savesip.org. Or another option for you is we opened up an online store at Sip of Hope, which we actually didn't have running for the first 2 years. And you can order some delicious bags of Dark Matter's Sip of Hope coffee. And if you're in the greater Chicagoland area, you can even swing by and pick up the bags from curbside pickup. And you can do that by going to Sip of Hope Coffee to the website, and you'll see the online ordering thing in the store. It's pretty common sense. I hope you know how to do it. And yeah, we're doing pickups are on Wednesdays and Saturdays, but shipping is done throughout the week. So again, Michelle, Pete, homie from the squad of Sip of Hope. Michelle, please stay on with us if you want as we move into the rest of the show. So Sip of Hope being a fundamental flagship piece of programming for Hope for the Day, it's part of our outreach. And when we talk about outreach, the goal with outreach is doing things to raise the visibility of resources, of information, of the conversation. Any sort of way we can break the silence is what we call outreach. And Sip of Hope is a place that serves that. When we set up at concerts, when we do digital work on social media, that's part of outreach. And the other part of what Hope for the Day does to achieve proactive prevention is education. We want to get you to sit down and go through our proactive prevention education. We have 1 hour sessions and experiences, and we even have like a 4 hour workshop. And we've brought a lot of this stuff to the digital platform, and we've brought it at no cost for folks. But I think talking about Sip of Hope is a good transition to where we're going next, is that Sip of Hope is outreach, but it's also a place to connect communities. And mental health impacts everyone. And I'm sure you can nod your head and be like, of course it does. And suicide has no prejudice. So it's important, though, that when we talk about this thing of meeting people where they are, not where we expect them to be, the goal of achieving proactive prevention, of reducing rates, of trying to create early intervention before people reach a state of crisis is not a conversation that's done exclusively by our founder, Johnny Boucher, or through me, or Mike, or even it's not just, or Michelle, who in her own way is part of this whole proactive prevention goal by working at SIP. It's a community thing, and more importantly, because mental health impacts everyone, we need to make sure that we're respecting the dignity of individual experience. And that's representation. That's talking about mental health and all the different spectrums and intersections that it impacts our quality of life. And why we love Sip of Hope is because, well, it's an outreach tool. It's also a place where people can connect from those different intersections. The diversity that walks into Sip of Hope can even be controversial. People who come from marginalized communities are meeting in a space that's inviting and empowering to them, in the same space where there's people who are coming from fire safety or law enforcement, where you cannot have an honest conversation about being marginalized in America and law enforcement without recognizing that there are conflicting and contentious realities between the two. And yet they still have to be able to have spaces for their own conversations, because if we want changes and want better things to come, the improvements have to start internally and work outwardly. We can demand and yell all we want, but until we actually see real tangible changes happen, a lot of it ends up being a frustrating, shouting match. And it's not about both sides, because that's an illusion too. It's about getting to the honest truth of things. And when we talk about mental health and the way it impacts so many different facets of our lives, our quality of life, people with diagnosed mental illness, we see a correlation between cardiovascular disease and eating disorders and other physiological maladies that have a direct link to undertreated and untreated mental health challenges. We know that people with nearly 20% of individuals with a diagnosed mental illness also experience a substance abuse challenge. These are statistics I'm pulling from the CDC and NAMI. We think about the people who have to support individuals with intensive mental health challenges, caregivers. Caregivers in America are providing nearly an average of 32 to 35 hours of caregiver work, that's unpaid, that's unrecognized, to a loved one or someone in their life each week. Mental health is so dramatically impacting. And so we've developed at Hope for the Day something that we call variants, where the different intersections of mental health aren't just approached as an omnibus. One of the biggest problems with mental health and stigma is that there's an authority figure, typically like an institutional figure, that says, all right, everyone come into this room, and if you're a teen, you go into this corner. And if your problems with mental health are linked to sexual identity, sexual orientation or gender identity, you're in this corner. If your mental health problems are because you're male, you go in that corner. If they're because you have served in the military, you go into that corner. If it's because you're poor, you're over there. If it's because you're rich, you're over there. If you're rural, if you're urban, if you're Black, if you're white, if you're Latino, you're Asian. Always at the front of this conversation, there's these compartmentalizations. And Hope for the Day, we've brought a big tent approach that, the dignity of individuals for everyone, and that we want to treat each individual to their own experience. And why that's important that I bring that part up is because eventually when you have the mental health conversation, well, we start out at it's okay not to be okay. When you start to drill down deeper, you are going to have to get to a place where people are going to need and want to have a conversation in which there's people that look like them, sound like them, or come from even closer levels of their experience. And they have taken the agency to talk about the situation and build an audience and a support group around this segment, this intersection of the conversation for themselves. There's a big difference between that and an authoritative agency sort of self-determining for everyone, autocratically determined for everyone, versus us making self-determined decisions to create those different sorts of intersectional conversations. So we have the variants, and that's a really long-winded way of just saying that one of the things that we're going to be rolling out over the next couple of weeks to the Hope for the Day community is the variants. These are the deep dives. These are self-generated intersectional conversations on mental health from people who have lived the experiences and have helped define education and outreach that they believe can work best. Instead of it being crafted in a dry academic space, or handed just directly from clinicians, it's asking people who've been directly impacted and speaking their truth. So I did way too much talking there. And I want to let some of the folks who have really taken a step up in the variants sort of talk about that. And the first one that you're going to hear a lot about is what we call 86 The Silence. This was an organically created group that, even though we have a clinical advisory group signs off on the work and oversees that level of it, it's people who are actually from these experiences, from these lived experience corners and intersections. So our first guests, making sure they're on right now, is we're gonna have the good homie David jump in here. David, want to make sure we can hear you and see you?
What's up, Carl?
David.
What's up, guys? Hey.
What's up, good brother? So,
What's up, brother?
Mike had just shared a little bit of a logo image of 86 The Silence, and now he's showing a fabulous. That's got to be from what, Taste or maybe Lala?
It was the Taste.
Okay. Oh, I'm gonna miss it. So, David, please give us an introduction to yourself first, formally, and your background, and then we'll talk a little bit about what 86 is.
Right on. My name's David Bacso. Quick backstory. I was raised in the restaurant world. I spent the last 10 and a half years refining that career here in Chicago. And in my time here, I've found many stressors that in these jobs can be completely avoidable with the adjusted shared perspective. And that's what drew me to Hope for the Day. And that's what drew me to 86 The Silence.
Thank you so much for joining us, David. And, tell us a little bit about how you see 86 The Silence.
Well, like I mentioned, I see so much in my time that could be completely avoidable if we could break the stigmas in the food and beverage workplace. I think, like, for example, when I would go into Sip of Hope, what's up, Michelle? When I would go in there, the inspiration in that spot is real. I think if we can take that mentality that exists within the walls and expand upon it, we'd all be better off. And I just wish more places were like that, because it's not all happiness out there. So, and it should be.
And thank you for sharing that. There's a lot of things here that, if someone says, well, why hospitality, why food and beverage, why, so what, like being a server is hard? I don't get it. Like, what's the deal? Like, when we talk about this, I'd like to know, from a stigma standpoint, what are some of the things you've seen that sort of makes this endemic?
Well, I think that in the restaurant and bar scene, and I'll just throw out the music venue scene as well, because we share a lot of similarities. Like, you can't show weakness because it means of a loss of a shift or repercussions of how you're perceived, or it could impact your opportunities to advance in a career, etc. Like, people are scared to voice how they feel. And it would just be better off if we can navigate away from that toxic environment.
That's great. And before we go further, we have one other homie who's joining us before we start to dive in on what 86 is really hoping to accomplish. A Hope for the Day team member and also active participant with 86 The Silence, Joel. I want to make sure we can hear and see Joel. Can we hear and see Joel?
Hello.
Brother Joel. Joel, please give the audience a quick elevator. What an epic picture.
I don't own an elevator yet, but I'm getting there. My name is Joel Frieders. I'm a Scorpio. I like long walks on the beach and fluffy white pillows. I've been working with Hope for the Day officially since August of 19, unofficially since about June of 18. And I am involved officially now as the public policy director and I forget what the actual acronym is because it sounds pretty cool. But I work in partnerships, and specifically over the last few months, I've been working specifically with craft breweries across the country, trying to bring the conversation about mental health paired with alcohol consumption and craft beer into a not only a conversation that's, you know, approachable, but isn't one that's so terrifying that we have to worry about, oh, what's he gonna say? Because we realize that a lot of the stigmas about mental health and alcohol all assume that you can't have a conversation about one with the other, which is completely false. So it's been a pretty inspiring last 6 months just in having the conversation with craft breweries that are incredibly thirsty, pardon the pun, dad joke, for having the conversation in a public way so that they can then bring that conversation into their communities.
That's perfect. And don't apologize for the dad jokes. We're going to give a shout out to someone. So thank you, Joel, for jumping on as well. So 86 to silence. Two of the salient goals are people get connected with people who are like them, right? And there's a wide spectrum of genders and identities and orientations and ethnic and cultural backgrounds that go into this. In these communities, though, would you say that there's the silence? And you've already kind of touched on this, but I kind of just want to put it like the nails right on the head of it. The leading factors of silence, you know, I just talked about substance abuse. So if everyone remembers at the start of this episode, we have the Shake the Conversation video, which is talking about the soda bottle. And you did not need to have a diagnosed illness like bipolar disorder to be dealing with a mental health challenge. Work stress can lead to a mental health challenge. And there's also a lot of ways to cover up mental health challenges too. Yeah. So, you know, you guys have both talked about it already a little bit, but just to sort of like really hit the nail on the head, David and then Joel, what do you think are sort of like big sort of issues in the world, as far as, you know, you can't speak for everyone, but issues you have seen, and what do you think are big silencing factors? We'll start with David and then go to Joel.
I'm a firm believer that approachability, if that's a word, you got to be approachable in situations. If you put off the vibe that I don't want to hear your problems, that just doesn't fly. And I think you got to be approachable, and I think that is very important mentality to move forward.
Yeah, I would totally echo those things. A lot of the comments that I hear when we're doing the things we don't say education and then the subsequent Q&As for the check-ins is that people assume that brewers are kind of above reproach when it comes to thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Trevor, who's become one of my best friends over the last year, you know, owning Old Irving, he makes the statement that people assume that because he's got a badass beard and he wears a flannel and he, you know, lugs freaking 50-pound things of flake dough everywhere, and you know, and he's well known in his industry, they assume that he is somehow like this guy that's like skinning deer in his free time, and everything does is like the utmost masculinity definition. And what that means is that everybody wants to, when they communicate with him, just immediately put a drink in his hand, and he's like, actually, I haven't had a drink in the last 2 weeks outside of sampling my own product because I got a baby on the way, you know, and like, and he's doing things for his health. So there's a cool kind of bridge between the idea that we have to kind of live up to this box that is checked. Like the brewer's box is big and it's bold and it's manly and it's bearded and it's, you know, it's incredibly non-emotional. And it's funny, I've actually heard him say a couple times where he's like, well, I actually, no, I'm not drinking right now, but come on, man, I drink rosé once in a while. And he likes to kind of downplay the idea that masculinity is like a necessary trait when you're in the craft brewing world. So it's funny on one end how if you are a brewer or involved in like, you know, like Dave with Kuma's, like I know that you like heavy metal and you smoke cigarettes in your house and you have 6 dogs and like you can just go off this list of, oh, and it's Jack Daniels and Marlboro Reds, and it's like, come on, like you're making assumptions and generalizations on people. And then what ends up happening is you remove that approachability and you don't have that I can have a bad day too type of environment going on where you've got this archetype at the top and then everybody beneath him needs to, you know, walk on eggshells because he's the brewer. And it removes this idea that we're all similar in the fact that we're dealing with thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and we react to the same situation differently. So from my perspective, as you know, I'm a consumer first when it comes to the craft beer industry. But since I work in promotion of craft beer, and I help with some distributor work, it's difficult sometimes to watch how this masculine idea removes the vulnerability that some of these brewers or just employees of breweries are entitled to experience. And I also think what that does is it does a disservice, because now you're not actually you're playing a freaking part, which is stupid. If I was in like an animated short of my life, it surely wouldn't be the things that people think I am. It would be a lot more in tune with how I actually am.
I just want to throw out there, I don't smoke cigarettes, so.
Good. Good.
And this is important why we were happy to have both of you on, is because Joel has been taking an active role as facilitating education pieces and tools. And David, you're coming in from the strategic level, and have also been engaging the work too, right? So from your experience, what's it been like sitting on the engagement side of this?
Well, due to this pandemic, I feel like I've hit a little roadblock that needs to be adjusted. But I tried to stay on a day-to-day engagement with friends in the industry and businesses that I support. Right now, it's kind of just like every day goes by, and I kind of have to reassess and remind myself that it's okay. So I try to reach out to homies in the industry as much as possible through this time, and try to offer any type of just support of being like, hey, thinking about you.
That's really critical for people to understand, because right now 86 to Silence addresses an industry that is severely rocked by the pandemic, and where I think it's the folks might be able to appreciate what masculinity or toxic masculinity or silence can do.
Bring that up.
And social worker expert graduate, don't be silent. That's a level of it too, and then but it also hits in other places too that expands beyond the gender, in that 86 to Silence is mental health challenges is always a risk to competency. And when you are on the service industry side, there's the brewery side, there's the food and culinary, drink and beverage side. And a lot of that is about being independent. If you walk in and you're a bartender, if you're a chef, if you're a server, if you're front of the house, back of the house, support of the house, whatever angle it might be, you're making your brand in your profession by your competency. You're getting hired because you're able to do X, Y, and Z efficiently, and you get brought onto a team. But in the service industries around food and beverage and hospitality, you're judged a lot as an individual first and then put onto a team. And that's life or death for people in terms of making sure they look and fit the competency part. And mental health challenges in any industry, you stay silent because you don't want people to think you're less than or weak or broke or whatever. So, before we talk about our other variant, what do you hope is a value that David and Joel, what do you hope is a value that you can give to other folks in the industry, who are silent, who maybe they hear 86 to Silent and they understand what 86 means, and they're curious about this. What's something you'd like to sort of shout out to people to get engaged with this variant, with this project, 86 to Silence? Either one of you jump off first.
Well, I think it's important to keep in mind that the restaurant, bar, and hospitality, food and beverage world, we adapt and persevere. And I think that right now we need help. So if you're able and not hit as hard through this pandemic, I think look into, you could check my socials, just check the internet, and there's plenty of places in Chicago you can support if able. Right now, we got to stick together through this. I think it's important to know that, and try to reach out and help places you support.
Yeah, I will echo those sentiments, but then I will also add that I think, I know we were not going to get back to a full normal anytime soon, but I think the overarching goal of 86 to Silence and the work that we're doing with craft breweries and within craft beverage on the whole is that we're trying to make sure that people are realizing that the people that they are interacting with don't necessarily have to play a part all the time. And like, yes, so like my existence in the restaurant industry was every day you show up, you do your prep work before you roll, you stay out of the weeds. If somebody that you know is in the weeds, you get them out of it. You make sure that your communication between you and the expo is nonstop. You got to be nice to the salad lady and the dishwasher. I mean, there's all these different things that you got to make sure that you're doing. But unfortunately, we kind of put up that wall in front of us that doesn't allow us to have a bad day or even share it. And that's part of one of my responsibilities as a dad, is making sure that I never cut off those lines of communication with my kids or make them feel like what they have to say to me is insignificant. But if I can apply what I've learned through my not only education with Hope for the Day, but the outreach that I've been able to do with the education seminars, is that one thing that we always do is we kind of start this pissing match with people subconsciously. And we don't realize that when somebody says, "Oh, last night was brutal," and you're already going to jump to like a conclusion like, "Oh, you drank too much," or "Oh, you did this or you did that to yourself." And it becomes a pissing match. And then you start seeing the effects of that stigma. And then soon people just don't complain. They just keep bottling it up. So my goal in this conversation within the, not just the food and beverage, but within craft beverage, is to kind of make sure that you have outlets to not only remind people that it's okay not to be okay, but whether it's a team check-in or you've got leads that are, overseeing 3 or 4 people underneath them, there is a strategic way within your organization to support your staff without it being all, kitties and rainbows and butterflies and making it feel like people can get away with things. It's not that you're going to get away with things. I can divulge information that I wouldn't make public just so that you understand where I'm coming from. But that also helps you better support me, whether it's one shift or an entire week. And it's making sure that we have it in a language that isn't just accessible to people that work in the industry, but it's for the people who are supporting that industry, because we want this conversation to kind of get into every little nook and cranny of every industry. But food and beverage is one where we've got really, really poor habits that just perpetuate. I mean, I remember one of the first restaurants I ever worked in, the guy that cooked would cook for, from let's say 11 in the afternoon till 11 at night, would get his after work shifty, and then go out to his car and have 3 more, and then wake up in his car and go right back to work. And it would say 4 or 5 days. And that's not a good way to live your life. You're going to burn the candle at both ends. You're going to fade out. And part of the issue with allowing that to perpetuate is that people assume that he's playing a part. Oh, he's the cook that's always here. That's old Randy. And then you let people live in dangerous situations, harming themselves, and you don't intervene. So it's making sure that we understand that you don't have to save everyone, but you need to advocate for everyone just as well as you need to advocate for yourself.
And I think coping skills need to be taught, because what if that cook doesn't know anything else? What if it's that's what his father did and that's what his grandfather did and that's just what he knows. So I think teaching coping skills in a productive manner is what's also most important. And people that have really good communication, the cook talking to the server and the line expo talking to the whoever, like the communication building blocks are there. It's just about adding the right words to the communication.
It's also like following through with policy making. I work in kind of like a restaurant for medicine in a compounding pharmacy, but you need to have routine check-ins, not just with the people at the top and the people at the bottom. It's everywhere in and throughout, because if you don't know what's going on and what's wrong, I mean, if you've got a bottleneck at one specific spot and it's related to one specific person, maybe the dude's a lefty, and if you moved him around, things would flow better. I mean, they can be that simple, but it also applies to mental health challenges. And that's why understanding that everything isn't solved with an after-work cocktail or 5. It can actually be fixed a little bit if you address it before it becomes a mental health crisis or a crisis in general.
Yeah, I think the dependency that being a workaholic can provide, like an escape, is very toxic. And through this pandemic where we are closed, I think if we want to find some positivity out of it, there's no better time than now to reshape it once we start back up.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And this is, I want folks to sort of pay attention at home. what you see on screen is a small example of a support during this pandemic. The Chicago Hospitality Coalition is one of a number that we have found around the United States, and there's others in internationally as well, that are trying to find different ways, whether it's financial support, food support, also just more essentially emotional and psychological support. Those are resources and tools, but the point of 86 to Silence is really to be able to have that conversation and make that connection legitimately and have it from people who can talk the talk because they understand and have been there. And also trying to call out and reach people who may be struggling to have the conversation or don't know how to have the conversation. And it may be hard for them to connect with someone who's never been inside of their industry, never been inside of their walk of life. That's just one of the obstacles that keeps us silent, is feeling like others don't understand. So this is really a small preview of what we're going to be diving into on the May 21st episode of Conversations Cafe, where you'll be seeing David and Joel and the larger 86 to Silence team, because this program wasn't built by me or Mike or Johnny or the Hope of the Day team exclusively. This was built with the consultation and designs of folks like David and Joel, who talk about and implemented and inputted details that they believe strongly in. And we did have Sip of Hope members in the squad, consult on that as well. And there's going to be folks that you're going to meet who are from the chef side of things, from the industry catering side of things. And that's going to be May 21st that you're going to tune in for Conversations Cafe 86 to Silence. Also that week of May the 18th through the 22nd, we're going to be launching the inaugural publicly available 86 to Silence education experience. So right now we've been doing things very much in controlled, sort of like closed door education as pilots. And so we're going to be starting basically next week to recruit and reach out to the public. If you intersect in these communities, to sign up for the 86 to Silence education experience, which will be facilitated by folks like Joel and David, and folks who couldn't be here with us like Trevor and Janine. Speaking of which, before we go into a preview of our other variant that is launching next week on the May 14th episode of Conversations Cafe, I believe we have a little video from one of the other building members of 86 to Silence, Janine Wise, who is on camera right now, or on screen right now, with a pre-made video. So we're gonna let Janine Wise's video launch real quickly.
Hi everyone, my name is Janine Wise and I'm a chef in Chicago. I work for the Frontera Restaurant Group. I'm Rick Bayless's culinary assistant, and I also teach and help run a program we started called the Impact Culinary Training Program. And we teach culinary fundamentals to youth on the West Side and surrounding areas, and provide them with internships in the best restaurants in the city and a lot of wraparound services, including mental health awareness. I'm very proud to introduce a program from Hope for the Day called 86 to Silence. It's the hospitality industry variant. I've personally experienced loss in my life of friends in the hospitality industry through completion of suicides. And obviously it's a very painful and traumatic experience, and I have my own issues with mental health that I receive help for, and I don't want to lose anybody else. It's not necessary. With that being said, I'm very excited about 86 to Silence and being able to bring the message to eliminate the stigma around mental health and proactive suicide prevention. I believe that I'll be part of the Conversations Cafe on May 21st. I couldn't be here tonight, so I wanted to make sure I got a message in. Yeah, I'm very proud of everything that Hope for the Day is doing. I'm very proud to be part of the hospitality industry in Chicago. I love us. I love you. Keep going. And thank you.
Thank you, Janine.
It was so beautiful.
So-
It brought such a smile to my face.
So that's going to be where we put a pin in it for 86 The Silence. And again, we're going to be publishing all this stuff in our newsletters and on social media, but marking your calendars right now, if you've heard anything about 86 The Silence that plagues your ear, that we officially go wide open with further details on May 18th. And the May 21st episode of Conversations Cafe is going to be a deep dive into 86 The Silence with our good homies Joel and David and some other guests as well. On screen right now is Mike Vinopal, our education
I butt in
lead.
for just a second because another homie from the cohort 86 crew did an extra special, thoughtful thing today. She is the pastry chef at Bad Hunter. Her name is Danielle Snow, and she's amazing. She made us a loaf of bread and dropped it off today. Look at that stuff.
Yeah.
How about that? How about that? Pretty unbelievable, right?
Well, you might as well
So-
drop this Trevor's baby picture. Got a picture.
Yeah, you want me to get that ready? You want to see that?
Yeah. Another guest that you'll see on May 21st, Conversations Cafe. Another founding member of the 86 The Silence program is Trevor, who's one of the good brothers over at Old Irving Brewing.
All right, here we
One of the
go.
founders.
And this is special. Let's all say hi to baby Griff. Ow, ow, ow.
Trevor wasn't able to join us because you can see he is a newborn baby. And
Man. Hope babies.
celebrating all the good news we can
Love you, Trevor.
have is
Love you,
awesome.
Amanda.
Thank you, Mike. You might as well stay on camera, Mike. So this is 86 The Silence. Again, May 18th, we go live with it. May 21st is the Conversations Cafe. But starting next week with the May 14th Conversations Cafe, we also roll out our other variant, which is called Project Red Team. And we're going to be spending the May 14th episode with a number of guests and folks who have stepped up to build this program. And Project Red Team is focused on individuals who have made the civic commitment and sacrifice. And what we mean by that is we're talking about anyone who has served in the military, in public safety, fire, EMTs, EMS, people whose commitments are to the general public, to the civic support level. Project Red Team is something that is probably one of the longest projects we've ever worked on, and was the basis from which we were able to build out things like 86 Silence and other programs. So it's really the sort of grandfather variant, because we wanted to make sure we got it right, and we didn't want to just have some sort of BS vaporware thing or make it look like we were just trying to take advantage or jump on the popular concepts. People tend to misabuse things like veterans and when it comes to providing programming, and we wanted to make sure that if we were going to do this, it was going to be credible. It was going to be something that we could feel confident introducing to others in a large scale. So our guest has been someone who has been at the foundational level of that, really almost from day one. This is going to be Mr. Ryan Shannon. Let me make sure we can see him and hear him. Ryan, good sir.
I am here. There we go.
What up, Ryan?
I had to click buttons. I'm sorry.
Good to see you.
You too.
So, Ryan, we're going to learn a lot more about you, even more so, on the 14th. But real quick, why don't you introduce yourselves to the audience? Tell them a little bit about your thoughts on Project Red Team.
Absolutely. Ryan Shannon, like Carl said, we've been working on Project Red Team. We are coming up on almost 2 years since we initially started talking about all this. So it's really exciting to finally kick it off. But again, we kind of want to tackle this a different way. I am a wounded veteran physically, and I have emotional mental health issues as well that I suffer with and deal with. The process wasn't smooth, I guess you could say, going from what you consider normal to just everything crashing around you. And through that process, I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about maybe some shortcomings and some inadequacies when it comes to veterans and first responders and how that all that works. But I also wanted to attack this at a different level. Project Red Team, the mantra is red, and it's not something new. It's something that's been out there before, and other people use it. It stands for remember everyone deployed. That's what it's normal. That's the normal acronym definition for red. We're going to switch it up a little. We're going to remind everyone deployed that it's okay to not be okay. We're also going to change the definition of deployed a little bit. I think if you're out there in your city on the front line serving every day, that's a deployment to me. If you're supporting a veteran or your son, daughter, friend, family, whatever is out serving the country, out on the front lines, and EMS right now, nurses, healthcare workers, man, they're on the front lines. They're deploying. But anybody that supports that and falls into that category, I want to bring them in here too. And you said it earlier, suicide doesn't discriminate. And I learned it the hard way. You don't think you're going to wake up and have depression or anything like that, and then it happens and you're confused and you don't understand it, and that's the worst part of it. I've been in the service industry. I can understand that. I haven't been a barista, Michelle, but I did make coffee on a submarine underwater a few times, so maybe that counts. But yeah, man, I wanna attack this differently. I wanna come at it from a different angle, and I wanna help everybody and anybody out there. If we can stop one, that's where we're at. That's the goal.
Hell yeah, man. I'm so excited.
This is a really big moment for all of us, for Ryan, Joel, Mike, David, Michelle. We're glad you're here too, because this is really, when we talk about making an impact, people have been cynical about the phrase like we're in this together, because people make jokes about, well, a celebrity, has their big house and I'm in a studio apartment. And we understand where there's blowback when people say we're in this together. But when we talk about it at Hope for the Day, we don't mean we're in this together, so like just follow us. We mean we're in this together, and we need to hear all of your voices. We need to hear your experiences. And especially when we talk about mental health, this has been a situation where for too long it's largely been, a certain type of voice talking at us, talking, with what we need to do and what we're supposed to know and what could make us better. And the fact is that we're missing too many people with the old ways we're having conversations. And what each and every one of you represent on the screen is someone who understands the impact, the pain, the struggle, and the challenge, but also doesn't want to just leave it at that, wants to step up and go somewhere else, make a forward step and make a change, and be what we really, when we say this, be an agent of impact. Ryan, even though next week is going to be the sort of centerpiece focus of it, I think it's important for folks who are listening right now, just as we touched on with 86, for people who maybe you've perked their ears, like you're talking about Project Red Team, what are some things that they can expect, if they were to engage with us? Maybe they heard you and they want to maybe reach out and say, like, I'd like to get into some of that stuff. What would you say to them?
I would say it's an all-inclusive thing. In the veteran community, you hear a lot about combat veterans and things like that, and getting shot or blown up and things like that. But that's not all that's happening in that community. Same with the police and stuff like that. There's a lot of other things that are going on in there that do directly impact your mental health, and I would just let them know, like I said, we're coming at this differently. There's no prerequisites to to come to one of our meetings, especially a Project Red Team. You know, I don't care if you have a Purple Heart. I mean, I do care. That matters to me. But in the realm of what this is, I don't care if you saw combat. I don't care, as long as you raised your hand, you made that sacrifice up to and including your life, which is what we sign up for. Um, uh,
Thank you
if
for
you need
raising
to
your
talk,
hand.
yeah, if you need to talk, we're here to talk. And I've got stories. Most of you have heard them. I've got quite a few, but it is that resiliency, right? We're taught that in the military. We're taught that I'm sure the first responders and everybody else hears that stuff too, because you do have to be very resilient. But there's a lot of other things in there. I think police work, what the dispatchers have to go through. You guys mentioned in the service industry, it's not just the cooks. You got the line people and who's making the salads, your hostesses, things like that. So there's all these different pieces, and we just need to make sure we include all of those pieces. And like I said, if your grandfather served or this and that, and you want to learn a little bit more, maybe what that was like, and come to our education piece, get some knowledge of it. I'll try not to bore you too much.
I'm sure we won't have to worry about that because, Ryan, you touched on something that's really important that, you know, when we talk about the integrity and credibility of what Hope for the Day is putting out, um, sadly and unfortunately, when it comes to lived experience, too many times the space for us, and I'm also speaking not from a Project Red Team standpoint, but just someone from lived experience as a suicide survivor and living with mental illness and trauma. Too often, those who've been impacted, whether it's you're directly impacted or you've been supporting someone who's been impacted, too often the only space you have in the mental health world is to get in front of a mic for a fundraiser, to be a show monkey, to tell your story and make people cry and then get off stage and let the other folks get in. And this is the complete opposite of that. And when we talk about variance, we don't want to confuse our audience, and like there's a lot of words coming out, but what we're talking about here is we're trying to raise the visibility. And Ryan, when you talked about the centralized word here is resilience, that there's no magic wand in mental health, okay? There's finding healing, there's finding tools for management to take control of your life, you know, but it's not one pill, one conversation, one sort of like power phrase that's going to fix you. It's building resilience and building the ability to not just survive one day, but to really get to a level where you can thrive. And I want to leave sort of this episode with people understanding that what this all is about is something that Hope for the Day, you're going to see the 86 to Silence and Project Red Team. You're going to see this all come under the banner of the Light Project. And we don't want you to get fixated to too many buzz terms, but the reason that we put this all under the banner of Light Project is because it's raising the visibility through our stories and providing that direct education and outreach through our stories and through our knowledge. And we have clinical backed education that you know goes into the heart of it, but we're trying to bring you into the conversation through our stories, through the stories of Ryan Shannon and Joel Frieders and David Bacso, and to have people like Janine and Trevor, and even our homies you've seen at SIP, folks like Michelle telling their experiences on the day-to-day is a part of this. And, you know, we could probably be here for another hour just talking the realness in each intersection from Red Team to 86 and beyond. But I wouldn't be a good show leader because we want to be able to save some of that meat for the next episodes. And so if you've been interested in what you heard today, I want to reiterate to you that live at the same back channel that you're on right now, at May 14th, we're going to be doing a full showcase on on Project Red Team, in which we're going to be meeting the central founding voices behind it and talking a little bit into the nuances and hearing about the stories that helped influence how we make these approaches. On May 21st, at the same time on conversationscafe.org, 6 p.m. starting time, we're going to be talking 86 to Silence, and you're going to see Joel and David and the other founding voices and talking about the shaping blocks behind that as well. And in between that, you're also going to see opportunities for education inside of these different specific intersectional focuses. Because we have our general audience education that you see available twice a week right now called Things We Don't Say. And we're not excluding you from these others. These are just given a focus to respecting the nuances inside of them. These are things that they created, that they wanted to champion and engineer. And there's a big difference between that versus some sort of institutional saying, this is only for you or only for you. So with wrapping up today, I would like to sort of just get a quick soundbite here. You know, we're in a new normal, and we don't even like saying normal because normal is typically just a setting on a washing machine, but we're in a new reality, right? And there's things that we should have maybe not liked about our old reality. And one of the things that I'm always asking folks right now is, as we go into the new, you know, into these coronial days as they are, what are some things that you've learned about yourself that you want to maintain in this newness? Because this is going to be it for a while, you know, and this could be doom and gloom, but this is another opportunity for perseverance and resilience that we're all binded to as well. So I want to do a dual header here. First, for our Project Red team folks, that's going to be Ryan here. Let me get a soundbite for just, you know, encouraging people to tune in next week. And then tell me what you'd like to, what's something new you're learning about yourself that you want to sort of keep with you in these colonial times.
Not put on the spot at all here. First off, I was never normal. I joined the submarine fleet as a 6'6" person, which is just not normal to begin with. But you're going to get the connection, the network. I know for me, it took 2 years before I ever went and sought any kind of therapy. I was still active duty, and I hid it. I really, really wish I didn't do that because it would have stopped a lot of other things from happening. I think we're taught that old mantra, rub some dirt on it and keep moving forward. Sometimes that's not the case. So hearing other stories and making those connections and being able to relate on that level, especially in the veteran and first responder area, is something I've personally seen help. I've given talks where big burly bearded up special operator dudes come up and they're in tears, and it's simply because I told the truth about it. I got out and I was vulnerable, and I let them hear what I went through and what I experienced, and they related. And that's what I'm looking for. If we can relate on it, it makes those conversations easier. That's when we start deleting stigma from it. Something I'd like to leave behind is I work for a large business. I'm an educator. I teach adults. But there was a time probably 2-3 weeks ago where I started getting real concerned that my job was going to be put in jeopardy. I graduated with my MBA last May and got fired the next week from my last job. And I didn't think that's how that worked. I thought you got something different with an MBA than losing your job. So that I didn't want to experience that again. And I found myself starting to worry more and more and more that my job was in question. But then I realized it's not in my control. So I've set myself up. Again, I have an MBA, I got veteran experience, I got all these things. So if that were to happen, and if that were the case, I've set myself up to rebound pretty well, I think. So I want to leave that worry behind. I don't want to sit here and think about that stuff anymore or not sleep because of it. And I've worked real hard at it the last couple of weeks, and I'm finding life keeps going, man. Enjoy the parts of it that you're there to experience, you know, don't worry about all that other stuff.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks.
And again, folks, remember Project Red Team rollout episode is May 14th, next Thursday, 6 p.m. we start. Ryan will be there. Let's go over to David.
Yeah, like
David's
what I've learned about myself through this time, similarly to how Ryan stated. Before this, I was always on the go, just go. I'd be home like maybe an hour after I woke up, and then maybe I get back home, have an hour before I went back to sleep. I was just always out working. And in that time, I didn't really experience a whole lot of real connection. And I've learned in this time to myself that what's really important is human connection and your family and friends, and making more of those. So I've learned what I think I want to strive for, to find continued happiness. And as far as what I might want to leave behind is the toxic environments that that exist way too often, changing unhealthy communities, and the toxic ones will fall by the wayside, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. Joel?
So you got the two questions, right? You got the teaser, and then the two things are the things that you want to keep and the things you want to forget, right? Okay, so my teaser for the 21st would be, it's not that we're equating active military to people that work in the service industry, but if you have not worked in the service industry, you understand that you're normally treated like a doormat if you are front facing, and if you're in the back, you're treated like a different kind of doormat, one that's just very sweaty. So I want to make sure that we're being aware of the fact that the conversation in 86 to Silence is geared around the fact that you have a persona that you put on in every job that you have, whether it's, you know, law enforcement or in the restaurant industry. But it's understanding that you don't have to assume that someone else's mask is on incorrectly by putting on them what you think they should be acting like or how they should be responding to something. So I would encourage you to, you know, come back to the podcast on the 21st to hear how we have kind of laid out a program that's specific to the nuances of stigmas and, you know, self-care in the restaurant and food and beverage industry. Now, as far as the pandemic and Carl, the coronial days is hilarious, and I'm stealing it. I'm going to claim
stickers.
Yeah, that's like, I'm glad I was on mute because there was a little bit of a like, that was great, man. But as far as the things that I want to leave behind from the old world, would be my incessant need to fill every hole in my calendar with something outside of where I'm sitting right now. Because one thing that I've learned through, you know, being home since basically March 14th, outside of going to work every day, I never had like a place to like hang my stuff up. And if you can see behind me, I just put this up in the last, this is my first quarantine, so I'm sorry, I'm not used to all this time on my hands, but I cleaned out my closet. I cleaned my basement. I hung up my guitars. They've been in boxes since, you know, 2006. And it's not that I don't play a lot, but I didn't play a lot. So I've played more guitar in the last 3 months since the middle of February, and now with the quarantine, than I have in the last 6 years. And that was something that used to be my job. Like I was, you know, like you said, I was Mr. Monkey Man dancing on the crowd, you know, having people throw peanuts at me. And even though they were just screaming, "Play Brown Eyed Girl," I miss the guitar. I miss my connection to music that I've never heard before. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that it's at least every other day, I, you know, enjoy a few minutes by myself, turn on a song I've never heard before that I can vibe with, and then just play with it, because I miss people. I miss playing with people. I miss having a place that's mine. I mean, yes, this little room is only like 6 by 4 and it looks like enormous. There's no room in here. So it's like, but I got a place to go and it's mine, and I can plug in and get as loud as I want because my wife kind of likes it when I play guitar. That's how we met. But yeah, I want to keep playing my guitar. I want to keep feeling like being creative is therapeutic, because man, sometimes when you hit that stride, and I know Mike can attest to this, you hit that stride and it's like, if you open your eyes, you might break it. And it's like that connection to the ethereal or the universe, whatever you want to call it. Bro, I've found it a couple times, and I'm just playing my guitar in the freaking basement. So I've done like maybe 8 or 9 in the last couple of weeks where I just hit record on my camera for no reason. I've never heard most of these songs, and I just try to find a way to connect with somebody else's art, because I miss that shit really hard. And it's a good way for me to feel like what Joel was before I became whatever the hell you're looking at right now. So I want to keep doing this. So That's my 2 cents. Or
It's
Matt's.
beautiful. It's beautiful, Joel. Thank you so much. And
So your
last,
jams rule. His jams rule.
it's James
Jams are rolling.
A lot of guitars.
Hey,
here.
look at that one, David. Ooh,
Gee, bro.
I've been doing the same. It's therapeutic.
that looks like the one Alex Subik just picked up from Bad Candy and Locomotive. She just got an SG herself. It's awesome.
Oh, nice.
And want to make sure we give we're going to give your final words to someone who, I got to tell you, whenever I would go to SIP, you know, I'm typically going as like employee boss hat, and I don't have to mess with the SIP staff because that's peak age world, but you know, you're meeting the wonderful SIP staffers and everything. But I think I definitely took for granted. No, I didn't really take it for granted, but I can tell you, meeting the SIP staff is always like a supercharged like shot of joy. Even if they're like down on the day, it's just good to see folks like who make the commitment and they're just part of the team. I love seeing our team, whether it's in the over the day office or at the SIP office. But you know, I got a little verklempt seeing Michelle on camera because, you know, I don't know. I just realized like how, I don't know when the last time I saw you was. So anyway, Michelle, let's hear your words.
Oi. Well, I've been spending a lot of time with my cats. They both apparently want to be on YouTube. So I don't know. Yeah. I guess I have realized that, I mean, I've always known that I need like human connection, I have to have it all the time, and being at home doesn't work for me usually. And there'd be days where I would open at SIP and come home, take a nap. By 3-4 o'clock, I'm like, I gotta get outside. I gotta do something. I'd walk right back to SIP and spend a couple hours, and who knows what will happen. And it's been really hard. It's been really hard not to be able to do that. But I have learned how to stay home and be okay with that. Finding things to do and keep myself busy. And I've kind of settled into it. So I'm proud that I've learned that during this time. And something that I want to get rid of, I want to change the world, and I want the world to like get rid of all the negativity. And I want people to support each other and love each other and be kind to each other and cry with each other. And I want people to just like all the things. I just want people to be good and kind and nice. And I hope that this time that we all have had separately will just bring us together closer with masks, I guess. That's all.
Oh,
That's beautiful. And if anyone sees Ryan Shannon's screen,
that's pretty
we show
great.
the Hope of the Day face mask, which you can get at our Threadless store. You can go to hftd.org and on the store. And if you buy one of those masks, we're raising funds for to support pandemic relief.
Yeah, it's for MedShare, a nonprofit that specializes in getting that PPE, that personal protective equipment, to the frontline health workers. And Threadless has raised like $200,000 already through the sale of their different artist shops and the masks going out. So thanks for holding that up, Ryan.
That's perfect. So thank you so much, Michelle.
Yeah, Michelle.
And I want to thank Mike Vinopal, Rick Osowski, Vicky Cisnet. That's part of the Conversations Cafe production team. We would not be able to make this happen without them. And I want to thank all of our guests, Ryan, David, Joel, Michelle. Thank you so much for contributing your time, your voices, and your insights. Absolutely critical. And as we close out for this episode, real quick as reminders, May 14th, again, that's going to be Project Red Team Deep Dive debut. And May 21st is the 86th Silence Deep Dive debut. We're also going to be announcing official Project Red Team and 86th Silence education dates for the general public. And we're going to close out here with, this is the beginning of Mental Health Month, and we're all united in this whole pandemic thing. And maybe if you didn't know that May is Mental Health Month, the way we want you to think of it is maybe this is the beginning of a conversation that you're going to normalize in your lives every month and every day and every week afterwards. And normalizing a mental health conversation isn't just about talking about what hurts you. It's also talking about what gives you hope. And I asked the question about what's the newness that you're looking for, because right now we've not had the agency to make this decision to slow down and be quarantined and all that kind of stuff. That wasn't on ours. That's been compelled on us. And the pandemic, I make the coronial days comment, and that might sound light, but it's a very serious thing. You know, in America, we've lost more people as of May 5th, we've lost more people in 2 months to this virus than we've lost in total in the entire Vietnam War. We mourned for weeks and weeks when we lost 3,000 plus in 9/11 on one day, and we average about 3,000 people dying by the virus each day. And I'm not saying that as a Debbie Downer. I'm saying that as a point of reality, that if you can find positives in your life, if you can find new realizations about ways you might want to live your life when this is all done, I think you also probably are starting to look back at like maybe images or photos or videos of like group interactions. If you ever had like an old video at a concert, and all of a sudden it might be hitting you like, holy crap, like I can't have that right now. And we haven't really been, our generations, and when I say generations, I'm like, if you're 80 years old and younger, and even then, if you're 90 years old, you have not been in a world where, because of a lack of your agency in America, we've been insulated to not have to make those kind of sacrifices. And this is a collective sacrifice, and it's not one that's going to end tomorrow. But that gives you even more awareness that if you're able to find positives, these aren't false silver linings. If you're able to find things that you like about yourself, you find yourself doing things that make you feel good or fulfilling, that's not your imagination, that's not killing time, that's showing you things that are essential. Because right now we're in a place where the essential is what's going to matter, and the superfluous and the whatever, the meaningless and the vapor will distill away from us. It'll shed away. You know, it's like a slow rotisserie chicken, and we're just dripping away the fat. And a lot of the times, the fat might have been trying to chase $1. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not trying to be a preacher here. I'm just trying to point out to you that essential to our mental health and finding balance and resilience is being able to take ownership of what fulfills us and what sustains us and what gives us a sense of completion and safety. And right now, in such an apparently traumatic time, finding the things that make you feel good, finding the things that you love, isn't just about occupying or killing time. That's actually about bolstering and building a core foundation for your mental health. And if you can find those things and bring them with you, no matter where we go in the days and weeks after, we're going to walk out of this pandemic mumbo jumbo with an even stronger foundation for your mental health. Because the conversations may require prescriptions and clinical therapy treatments and things like that, and that's part of the process. But these self-applied tools are also part of the long-term game of keeping you on this rock and functional and healthy. And it can't just all be clinicians. It isn't just all clinicians. It does have to be a lot of self-applied things. So I want you to really take a heightened appreciation for the things that are making you feel good. People who've discovered they like to bake, don't think you're just killing time. People who are sewing, people who are playing music, drawing, singing to themselves, dancing. If you find out working out is your thing, or maybe because you don't have the gym, working out really wasn't your thing, maybe you're discovering truths about yourselves. Those positives are not superficial, friends. I'm telling you right now, they're part of building the you that's going to be the better, more resilient you as we go through this. And I want to close out this episode with a video that is not a Hope of the Day production, but it's something that, you know, we should be able to shed light and positivity wherever we find it. And I personally, and this is entirely me, I personally saw this video and thought it was just a wonderful way to philosophically think about the future, because we can either think in the negatives and we're all walking towards Mordor, or we can think that there's a positive rate after this. And so, again, thank you for all our guests. Thank you for listening and watching tonight. And I want to close out on this video. Please stick around and watch it. If you think it's saccharine and corny, I don't care. I think it's wonderful. So everyone, join us next week and the weeks after, and otherwise have a great and wonderful day.
Tell me the one about the virus again, then I'll go to bed.
But my boy, you're growing weary, sleepy thoughts about your head.
Please, that one's my favourite. I promise just once more.
Okay, snuggle down, my boy, though I know you know full well. The story starts before then, in a world I once would dwell. It was a world of waste and wonder, of poverty and plenty, back before we understood why hindsight's 2020. You see, the people came up with companies to trade across all lands, but they swelled and got much bigger than we ever could have planned. We'd always had our wants, but now it got so quick. You could have anything you dreamed of in a day, and with a click. We noticed families had stopped talking. That's not to say they never spoke, but the meaning must have melted, and the work-life balance broke. And the children's eyes grew squarer, and every toddler had a phone. They filtered out the imperfections, but amidst the noise, they felt alone. And every day the skies grew thicker, till you couldn't see the stars. So we flew in planes to find them, while down below, we filled our cars. We'd drive around all day in circles. We'd forgotten how to run. We swapped the grass for tarmac, shrunk the parks till there were none. We filled the sea with plastic, because our waste was never capped, until each day when you went fishing, you'd pull them out, already wrapped. And while we drank and smoked and gambled, our leaders taught us why. It's best to not upset the lobbies. More convenient to die. But then in 2020, a new virus came our way. The governments reacted and told us all to hide away. But while we all were hidden, amidst the fear and all the while, the people dusted off their instincts. They remembered how to smile. They started clapping to say thank you and calling up their mums. And while the car keys gathered dust, they would look forward to their runs. And with the skies less full of voyagers, the earth began to breathe, and the beaches bore new wildlife that scuttled off into the seas. Some people started dancing, some were singing, some were baking. We'd grown so used to bad news, but some good news was in the making. And so when we found the cure, and were allowed to go outside, we all preferred the world we found to the one we'd left behind. Old habits became extinct, and they made way for the new, and every simple act of kindness was now given its due.
But why did it take a virus to bring the people back together?
Well, sometimes you've got to get sick, my boy, before you start feeling better. Now lie down and dream of tomorrow, and all the things that we can do. And who knows, if you dream hard enough, maybe some of them will come true. We now call it the Great Realization. And yes, since then there have been many. But that's the story of how it started, and why hindsight's 2020.
Because if you look at the camera, they know someone's filming it.